It was the summer of 1997 when the Peterson family thought they had finally found their dream home. After years of cramped apartments and constant moving, this house seemed like a miracle. A three-story colonial with white shutters, wide porches, and a sprawling backyard where the children could play. It stood proudly at the edge of town, isolated but inviting, like something out of an old postcard. The price was shockingly low. Too low, in fact. For a house of that size, with 5 bedrooms, 2 staircases, and a massive attic, it should have been far beyond their budget. But the real estate agent smiled politely and brushed off their questions. "It's just been on the market for a while," she said. "Families move in and then move out. Old houses sometimes don't suit modern lives." That answer didn't bother the Petersons. They were eager to believe they had simply gotten lucky. They walked from room to room, admiring the high ceilings, the way sunlight spilled through the dusty windows, the creak of floorboards that seemed charming rather than unsettling. To them, it wasn't just a house. It was the promise of stability, of new beginnings. But hidden in that promise were shadows the Petersons could not yet see. Because while they saw beauty, the house was waiting. And it had been waiting for them. At first, the house seemed ordinary. A little too cold in the mornings, a little too drafty at night. Nothing unusual for a century-old home. The Petersons laughed it off, telling each other they would get used to the quirks. But the quirks soon turned into something harder to ignore. It started with footsteps. Soft, deliberate footsteps echoing across the upstairs hallway when everyone was gathered downstairs. Mr. Peterson would storm up the stairs, convinced one of the children was sneaking around, only to find empty corridors and doors closed tight. Then came the smell, smoke, faint but distinct, drifting through the rooms late at night. Mrs. Peterson would panic, searching the house for a fire, yet every time there was nothing. No ashes, no source, just the lingering scent of something burning where nothing burned. Doors began to behave strangely. Some refused to open, as though held shut by invisible hands. Others swung wide on their own, slamming so violently the walls rattled. The children grew uneasy. At night, they woke screaming about someone standing at the foot of their beds. Not a monster, not a stranger, but a figure, faceless, silent, watching. The parents dismissed it at first as nightmares, but when both children described the same figure, down to the shadowy outline of its body, the laughter stopped. The Petersons began to sense what they couldn't explain. The house was aware of them, and it wanted them to know they weren't alone. As weeks turned into months, the Peterson family began to change. What had started as curiosity and unease soon twisted into something heavier, something the house seemed to feed upon. Mr. Peterson, once a patient and thoughtful man, grew irritable. Small inconveniences made him explode with anger. Slammed doors, sharp words, nights spent pacing instead of sleeping. Mrs. Peterson, who had been cheerful and full of energy, began to withdraw. She would sit for hours staring at the wallpaper, her journal filling with frantic notes about shadows that move when no one is there, and voices whispering at the edge of hearing. The children suffered the most. Their drawings turned from sunny skies and family portraits to twisted sketches of faceless figures in the windows, black scribbles surrounding the house, eyes staring from the attic. At night, their screams echoed through the halls, waking the entire household. They begged their parents not to leave them alone, not to turn off the lights. Even visitors noticed. Friends who came for dinner left uneasy, whispering later that the air inside the house felt wrong. Thick, suffocating, as though the walls themselves were listening. Conversations at the table would suddenly spiral into shouting. Laughter would die into silence. The Petersons could no longer deny it. Something inside the house was changing them, and it wasn't going to stop. By the time the Petersons reached their breaking point, Mrs. Peterson knew she had to find answers. The strange sounds, the arguments, the nightmares, it all felt too deliberate, too patterned to be random. So she went digging. At the local library, she combed through property records, yellowed newspapers, and brittle photographs. What she uncovered chilled her to the bone. The house had been built in the mid-1800s by a wealthy industrialist, a man described in whispers as cruel and violent. Servants vanished under his employment. His own child, a little boy, was found drowned in the well at the edge of the property, though the records never named a suspect. Later owners fared no better. In the early 1900s, a woman was found dead in the parlor, her cause of death inconclusive. In the 1940s, a man locked himself in the attic and refused to leave, scribbling paranoid notes until he starved. Over the decades, every family who lived there either divorced, suffered breakdowns, or fled without warning. The house wasn't cursed by chance, it was a pattern, a cycle. It didn't just contain tragedy, it created it. When Mrs. Peterson returned home with her findings, her hands shaking, she realized the truth. Her family wasn't just living in the house. They were already becoming its next victims. By their second year inside the house, the Peterson family was no longer the same. Whatever warmth they had brought with them was gone, consumed by something darker. Mr. Peterson began hearing voices. They weren't faint whispers anymore, but full sentences, low and insistent, telling him not to trust his wife, not to trust his children. At first, he resisted. But the longer they stayed, the more those voices became his reality. He often stood for hours in the hallways, staring at nothing, lips moving in conversations no one else could hear. Mrs. Peterson wasn't spared either. Her journals grew frantic, the handwriting almost illegible. She wrote about eyes in the mirrors and hands in the walls. Her notes repeated one phrase again and again: "The house is feeding on us." The children grew restless, drawn into dangerous trances. More than once, they were found sleepwalking toward the basement furnace, into the road at night, or up the attic stairs where the air turned icy cold. Each time, they were pulled back just in time. One night, the neighbors heard screaming, endless, frantic, terrifying. They called the police. But when officers arrived, the Petersons opened the door calm and smiling, as if nothing had happened. Inside, the walls were streaked with scratches, the furniture overturned, the children trembling in silence. It was clear to anyone who looked closely. The house was no longer just haunting the Petersons. It was breaking them, piece by piece. The Petersons might never have left, if not for the youngest child. One morning at school, their 6-year-old daughter drew a picture so disturbing that her teacher pulled her aside. It showed the family inside the house, each of them with hollow eyes, their bodies twisted, strings tied around their limbs like puppets. And written in shaky letters at the bottom were the words, "The house wants us dead." Terrified, the teacher reported it. Authorities intervened. Within days, the Petersons were told to leave, for their safety and for their sanity. The departure was frantic, almost feral. They didn't pack carefully, didn't plan. They left clothes in the closets, dishes still on the table, toys scattered across the floors. The house they had once adored was abandoned in a matter of hours, as though they were fleeing a fire. Neighbors watched in silence as the family loaded what little they could into their car. No one waved goodbye. No one wished them well. Everyone knew the Petersons weren't escaping a house. They were escaping something alive, something that had already claimed too much of them. When the front door slammed shut for the last time, the silence that followed was deafening. The Petersons were gone, but the house remained, waiting. The house still stands today, its windows boarded, its walls rotting, its garden overgrown with weeds. Locals whisper that if you walk past after midnight, you'll see lights flickering in the upstairs rooms, though the electricity was cut years ago. Others swear they've heard screaming carried on the wind, echoes of the Petersons' final nights inside. The family never truly recovered. Soon after leaving, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson divorced. Friends say he was never the same, paranoid, withdrawn, convinced that something still followed him. Mrs. Peterson lives quietly, refusing to speak of the house at all. The children, now grown, carry scars of nightmares they cannot shake. None of them has ever returned to the property. And yet the story remains. A house that seemed too good to be true, a bargain with a hidden cost, a place that didn't just shelter families, but consume them. Whether it was cursed ground, restless spirits, or simply the madness of isolation, no one can say for certain. But one thing is clear. Some houses are not meant to be homes. Pause, whisper soft tone. Some houses are meant to be hungry.